So we're here in the Christchurch Meadow, which looks a little bit like this, and I'm just going to read to you a little bit of a document that was written in 2010. But see what you make of this. The United States' initial policy of strongly discouraging citizens from flying proved deadly in its leniency, accelerating the spread of the virus not just within the US but across borders. However, a few countries did fare better, China in particular. The Chinese government's quick imposition and enforcement of mandatory quarantine for all citizens, as well as its instant and near-hermetic sealing off of all borders, saved millions of lives, stopping the spread of the virus far earlier than in other countries, enabling a swift post-pandemic recovery. So the celebration of draconian Chinese regulations. China's government was not the only one that took extreme measures to protect its citizens from risk and exposure. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Sound familiar? Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics and transnational terrorism to environmental crises and rising poverty, leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. At first, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval. It's almost like somebody knew how we were going to react. Citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy to more paternalistic states in exchange for greater safety and stability, which is what we're seeing now. Citizens were more tolerant and even eager for top-down direction and oversight, and national leaders had more latitude to impose order in the ways they saw fit. In developed countries, this heightened oversight took many forms: biometric IDs for all citizens, for example, and tighter regulation of key industries whose stability was deemed vital to national interests. In many developed countries, enforced cooperation with a suite of new regulations and agreements slowly but steadily restored both order and, importantly, economic growth. So this document was written in 2010. It's called the Lockstep. It's a lockstep chapter in a bigger document. It also has these additional points about what kind of technologies and changes might come into place when a pandemic hits. So it says MRI technology became the norm at airports and other public areas to detect abnormal behavior that may indicate antisocial intent. A scanner that can indicate antisocial intent, like perhaps making this video, who knows. In the aftermath of pandemic scares, smarter packaging for food and beverages is applied first by big companies, etc. So I don't really know what the smarter packaging means, unless it's just more hygienic packaging, but it could also mean something like that enables the purchases to be tracked more easily. I don't know. The application of health screening also changes. Screening becomes a prerequisite for release from a hospital or prison. Well, on lockdown, your home is already a bit of a prison, and they're talking about vaccine passports to just allow you to go back to work. So look out for that. Telepresence. So I didn't know what that was. Telepresence. The presence on telly, like a Zoom technology. Telepresence technologies respond to the demand for less expensive communication systems for populations whose travel is restricted, which is everybody at the moment. Driven by protectionism and national security concerns, nations create their own independent, regionally defined IT networks, mimicking China's firewalls, just what you want, Chinese regulations on the internet. Chinese-style regulations. Governments have varying degrees of success in policing internet traffic, but these efforts nevertheless fracture the World Wide Web. Yeah, freedom of speech. Scenarios of the future. Well, so this document, the overall document, is called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development, published in May 2010, written by a futurologist called Peter Schwartz. But it was sponsored by the Rockefeller Foundation. But I think just the parallels there between what we're going through should be interesting. And I know some people are just like, say, oh, you're conspiracy theorists, but you have to remember that a conspiracy theory is only ever like an accusation of wrongdoing against people in power, which the authorities have not yet confessed to. So bear that in mind, and other people think there's no such thing as a coincidence in politics. So interesting stuff, right? So I'll leave it there. Think about that for today. Cheers, take care.